They thought they had him contend. Bright badges, practiced rope of policies and procedure, the kind of confidence that comes from believing the world still follows rules. The alley smelled of rain and old gasoline. Under the flicker of a dying street lamp, a man with smeared paint and intelligent eyes folded himself into a smile that didn't reach his hands. Police try to handcuff Joker. The headline would read, if headlines could hold the truth. That night wasn't about capture. It was about an accounting. He didn't run. He let them close in, let the clink of metal and the whisper of leather feel like justice. In his voice, soft, almost tired, there was a ledger being balanced. Betrayals tallied, corruption named, debts called due. When the first officer reached for the cuff, Joker tilted his head and, for a breath, looked like a man who had missed the sun. Then he moved in a way nobody expected. Not with brute force, but with a cruelty that smelled like clarity. It felt disturbingly like mercy. Want to see how the world that failed him fights back? And how he answers? Subscribe now. They closed around him like a bad memory. Practiced, bowed, believing the world still answered to procedure. Joker let their hands find the warm metal of the cuffs as if he were reaching for an old friend. He could feel the city breathing against his spine, sirens in the distance, the wet hiss of tires, a million small indignities being cataloged into the night. He did not fight. That would have been too honest. Instead, he offered the police a face they could read, tired, amused, almost grateful for the choreography they demanded. "You could have run," one of them muttered, voice thin with triumph. "You could have run like 100 others." Joker tilted his head and smiled with the slow, patient cruelty of a man reminding someone of a debt. "Running is for people who don't want to be seen," he said. "I needed witnesses." It was true. He needed the cameras that watched the cuffing, the notebooks clutched in the hands of uniformed men who liked to think their signatures meant something. He needed the ritual humiliation of being booked. Corruption loves its pageantry. Exposed properly, it performs its own undoing. He had not been born a villain. Once, when his face was still his face, he believed in small truths. That coins mattered, that a kind word could steady a hand, that a promise kept was weight enough to stand on. Then a company built a tower. A crooked inspector signed away a neighborhood. A woman he loved lost her protests and then everything else to a litigator's smile. The law, the one wrapped in paper and sealed in tape, had been a joke. No, not the law. The people who wore the law like armor. Those are the ones he had come to settle with. When they shoved him into the squad car, the city's pulse quickened in a way he'd mapped weeks before. Traffic lights timed to choke certain streets. CCTV blind spots rehearsed. A maintenance crew bribed for a single overnight outage. Small surgical things that made the world behave like a set. He watched the officers' faces in the rear view and cataloged their names as if they were chapters. Sergeant Malloy kept his jaw tight. Officer Diaz hummed under her breath, nervous. Captain Hargreaves kept his victory close to his collar, the kind of man who smiled like a mortgage. At the station, the ritual continued, paper signed, questions asked and answered, the soft, perfunctory reading of rights. The booking photo, a freeze frame for history, would show the man with paint at the corners of his mouth and a passport smile. He thought of the faces in the crowd who had watched him that night, a teacher who had been blackmailed, a nurse whose complaint had vanished into file cabinets, a boy whose father had been arrested on falsified charges. He had become, in their eyes, an answer. "Why do you do it?" the detective asked as they led him past the evidence lockers, tone equal parts curiosity and the boredom of a man who had cataloged too many monsters. "Why the theatrics? You could have been practical." Joker laughed, soft and private. "Practical is what lets people sleep." I wanted them to wake up. The detectives expected a confession, or at least an admission of amusement. Instead, he offered directions. Not directions to hide, but to reveal. He knew where the receipts were. He knew which safe held which envelope, which desk drawer concealed which apology. He began to speak of names and dates and places as if reciting scripture. Hargreaves, March 14th, 3 envelopes. City Hall, The third basement file marked programs, the judge who liked to donate to charities with other people's money. Each syllable was small and surgical, and every small thing he gave them was a seed. And he had planted other things earlier that night. Somewhere downtown, billboards woke up and began to play files no one expected. A dozen independent journalists found emails they had not received before, attachments stamped with ledger entries and timestamps, photographs of envelopes sliding across mahogany desks. By the time the squad car doors thudded shut, the city was filling with the quiet, unsparing sound of truth being forced into the open. The first twist came like a splinter at the edge of a laugh. As the booking officer scrolled through Joker's confiscated phone, his thumb paused on a single file, a video 3 minutes long with no beginning and a face that shook the room when it filled the flat screens mounted in the station lobby. The man on screen was not the mayor, not a councilman, not the shadowy developer they had all been whispering about. It was Judge Remy, the judge who had lectured about order on Sunday mornings and cut bonds for the city's wealthy on Tuesdays. "Is that?" Malloy breathed. The judge looked exhausted. He looked older than his public face. He spoke directly into the camera with a voice that trembled only once, then steadied. He named dates. He named amounts. He named men who had thought themselves invisible. The confession was clinical and devastating. In the footage, the judge did not ask for mercy. He asked for someone to remember why he had done it. It was not the performance the city expected from its bastions of virtue. It was a rupture. Joker watched the officers on the lobby monitor with patient eyes. The room smelled of disinfectant and adrenaline. Phones buzzed. Screens lit up. The files moved from private inboxes to public feeds with the slow inevitability of winter. People outside the station began to gather, drawn by the glow. Then the second twist fell like rain. As the judge's video ended, the last frame lingered too long, not on the judge, but on the judge's right hand. A ring sat there, a simple band with a tiny chip, one the camera had caught clearly. The chip matched a photograph in Joker's wallet, a photo of a woman whose story had been erased 3 years ago. He had promised himself that night he would not let her name die unread. Officer Diaz's phone vibrated against her leg. A notification. Live. City Hall vault. Opening. The thumbnail showed Hargreaves smiling as he walked into the vault with a key. Joker's smile widened. "They like ceremonies," he murmured. "They always make the same mistake." They thought they had handcuffed a man. They had only corralled a beginning. The cell door clanged. The monitors in the lobby hummed. Outside, the crowd swelled. Inside, the files spread like a disease, and the man with paint at the corners of his mouth leaned back against concrete and waited for the next act to begin. He had given them a confession and a countdown. The city, for a moment, balanced on the edge of decision. Then, almost tenderly, Joker placed his head against the cold wall and closed his eyes. But his smile did not leave his face. The city didn't sleep that night. Screens glowed in apartments, offices, and even in police cruisers parked at red lights. The video of Judge Remy's confession had spread like fire through dry grass, and every ember carried Joker's laugh in its echo. The system he had spent years dissecting was now eating itself alive. Detectives were being questioned, politicians vanished from press conferences, and the air outside Gotham Central reeked of panic, masked as order. Inside his cell, Joker sat cross-legged on the floor, humming softly, an old lullaby his mother used to sing when the electricity was cut off. The flickering bulb above him made his shadow dance on the cracked wall behind him, long and crooked, like a second soul trying to crawl free. The door clanked open. Captain Hargreaves entered, his badge glinting under the weak light. He looked older now, sweat on his collar, eyes bloodshot from a night without sleep. "You think you've won?" Hargreaves said quietly. "You think chaos can fix what law couldn't?" Joker tilted his head, his painted smile faint but real. "Law?" He laughed softly, like someone telling a secret to himself. "Law is just order written by the loudest thief." Hargreaves slammed the metal bars with his baton, voice rising. "You destroyed lives. Judges, officers, people people who sold this city by the pound," Joker interrupted, his tone calm but cutting. "I didn't destroy them, Captain. I just handed them a mirror." For a moment, silence filled the air between them. The captain's breathing was heavy, the kind that comes when a man realizes his authority doesn't mean anything anymore. Then the phone on his belt buzzed. He turned his back, answering it in hushed tones. Joker could only catch fragments. The vault opened again. Files gone. Everything leaked. When Hargreaves looked back, his face was pale. "What did you do?" Joker smiled wider. "You should check your inbox." Hargreaves hesitated, then pulled out his phone. The screen lit up with a message sent from an anonymous address. Every lie has an expiration date. Attached was a single file, labeled Hargreaves_fundtransfers.mp4. His heart froze. He hadn't seen that footage in years. The one he thought he'd buried. The money, the envelope, the handshake. Everything. "Impossible," he whispered. Joker leaned closer to the bars, eyes gleaming like twin shards of glass. "No, Captain. Inevitable." The captain's hand trembled as he holstered his gun. "You think this makes you a hero? You're still a criminal." Joker chuckled. "Oh, I agree. But I'm an honest one. I don't hide behind a uniform." Moments later, alarms wailed across the building. Officers scrambled through hallways as emergency lights bathed everything in red. News vans crowded the station gates, reporters shouting questions nobody could answer. Someone had triggered a lockdown, but nobody knew who. Joker stood up calmly, brushing imaginary dust from his purple sleeves. "It's starting," he murmured. The cell door suddenly clicked, not with the usual metallic clank of keys, but a soft, deliberate click. The lock disengaged. Hargreaves turned, stunned. "What? Who opened that?" he shouted. No one replied. Through the chaos, Joker pushed the cell door open with 2 fingers. The hinges creaked like they hadn't been used in years. He stepped out, slow and deliberate, as if savoring the disbelief painted on the captain's face. "How?" Joker smiled faintly. "You really should update your security software, Captain. You never know who writes the code." Somewhere deep in the station, power surged, then died completely. The building fell into darkness. Only emergency lights painted everything crimson. For a few seconds, the city's most fortified precinct became a cave of shadows. When the backup generators hummed to life, Joker was gone. The cell stood open, the hallway empty, except for a single playing card resting on the floor. The Joker. On its back, scrawled in uneven red ink, were 3 words: "Truth is contagious." Outside, the chaos had spilled into the streets. Protesters held signs, reporters shouted over sirens, and screens across the city looped through confession after confession. Judges, inspectors, businessmen, every secret Joker had unearthed now belonged to the people. But in the midst of it, something else was happening. Videos began surfacing of masked citizens painting crude smiles on walls, wearing purple gloves, whispering his words. The system isn't broken. It's designed this way. He had become more than a criminal. He had become an idea, dangerous, uncontrollable, and spreading faster than the city could contain. Hours later, on a rooftop overlooking the burning skyline, Joker stood with the wind tearing through his coat. His paint was half washed away, revealing the weary face of a man who had once believed in justice. He lit a cigarette and watched the horizon shimmer with sirens and fire. "You see," he whispered to no one, "they don't need me anymore." He turned to leave, but behind him, a faint red dot blinked on his back. A sniper's laser. Joker stopped, smiled, and whispered, "Took you long enough." A shot echoed across the skyline. The screen of the world seemed to freeze for a second, but when officers stormed the rooftop, all they found was a smoking cigarette, a single playing card, and words spray-painted on the wall behind it, words that would haunt the city for years. "Kill the clown if you must, but you can't handcuff the truth." And somewhere, in another part of the city, a computer flickered to life. A new file began uploading automatically.
titled simply, Part 2.
The story wasn't over, not for Gotham, not for the Joker, because chaos, when born from injustice, doesn't die. It only changes its smile.
And that was only the beginning.
The city thought it silenced the clown, but his laughter still echoes through every lie that tries to hide in the dark. If you felt the chills, hit that subscribe button, because the next story might just make you question who the real villain is.